This is Jonathan Agarfif, Pro Boxing Fans, joined by Dan Rafael over Zoom. Dan, it is about coming up to 2:30 in the morning here in the UK, but had to get your reaction. Doesn't matter what time of day it is. Anthony Joshua knocks out Francis Ngannou. Just before I get your reaction to that, by the time this goes out, so will your Substack. So I'm sure everyone's gonna, check out what your thoughts are on that. Link will be in the description. But yeah, talk to me about it. Devastating from Joshua tonight.
Oh yeah, I mean that was they called the show Knockout Chaos, okay? And there were some knockouts on the card, but they saved the best for last, obviously. And that was the one of the biggest knockouts you could think of. I heard some people referencing that were on part of the broadcast. I think Darren Barker was one of the folks that said it was the biggest knockout that he can think of that he ever seen in person. When I think about knockouts I've seen in person, I can only imagine what that was like. Seeing guys like Paul Williams get knocked out by Sergio Martinez, and Manny Pacquiao get iced by Juan Manuel Marquez, and Ricky Hatton get knocked out by Manny Pacquiao. This was sort of like on that level of just a completely devastating one punch, good night, all she wrote kind of knockout. And Anthony Joshua always has had good punching power, but he really delivered it. You can have all the power in the world, but if you don't have a delivery system, it doesn't really matter. Anthony Joshua has a delivery system.
Absolutely. Francis Ngannou, what do you take from him tonight? Everyone said going in, look what he did to Tyson Fury. We're expecting potentially he can knock Joshua down, if not out. What did we learn about Ngannou tonight?
I mean, I thought Anthony Joshua was going to win this fight. I didn't think he was going to take him out in the second round. What we learned about Francis Ngannou is he's not as good as he was against Fury, and he probably isn't as bad as we saw him against Anthony Joshua. I mean, I think you're not what you are necessarily on your best night, and you're not necessarily what you are, what you show what on perhaps your worst night. It's probably somewhere in the middle. He's only 2 fights in to a professional boxing career in terms of he's been in the MMA field for a long time, but in boxing, 2 fights. And as he made the point to myself and others in the pre-fight conversation, how many guys would come into a new sport and not just start the new sport, but do it in against the two of the top, 3 guys. He said top 2 guys in the weight class. I would say to Francis, it's the top 3 because he wasn't thinking about Alexander Usyk, a man who was defeated Anthony Joshua 2 times in the recent past. But nonetheless, his point is well taken. He came to boxing and went right in the ring with the best guys out there. He didn't start off with novice fights and learning the craft and 4 rounders or moving his way up to the rankings. He went in and he went straight up with the heavyweight champ. And a lot of people thought that when it was over, he should have been the winner. And all those people obviously had the right to that opinion. It was a really close fight. He did score the knockdown, but obviously that opinion didn't matter, whatever they might have thought would happen against Anthony Joshua, because he took him out, with punishing knockdowns and a big knockout. So, if he wants to continue in boxing, he can probably improve. I heard what Anthony said after the fight: stay in boxing and hone your craft better, and maybe someday you can work your way up where you can be more consistent in these kinds of fights. It was not his night, though. His defense was obviously not very good. Joshua seemed like a man possessed, and and I don't want to take away from what Francis accomplished against Tyson Fury, but I'm not saying this after the fact. I was saying this all along, that part of the reason why Francis looked so good against Tyson Fury is because Tyson Fury didn't take the fight seriously. He didn't come in top shape. That was very obvious. You look at him when they showed video of him this week in Saudi Arabia as he's in training camp now for the rescheduled date against Usyk. He looks much, much tighter, spelter, just in much better condition. And he thought, like a lot of us thought, oh, he's an MMA guy. He's a great athlete in MMA. We respect him for being a UFC heavyweight champion, but he's not a boxer. Tyson Fury is one of the best fighters in the world. He's going to take this guy out with ease. Now, it's okay for guys like you and me to think that, because we don't got to get there and fight the guy. For Tyson Fury, that's the wrong attitude or a wrong mentality for anybody that's going to the ring with somebody, because it just takes the one shot. And so Tyson Fury made Ngannou, not to say Ngannou wasn't good, but he made him look that much better because he was so ill prepared for the fight. And I think that was backed up tonight because Joshua was in immaculate condition, well trained, very focused, clean punching, straight shots, no messing around. And that's what happens. And I assume, perhaps I'm wrong, we'll never know, that if Tyson Fury had shown up in the absolute optimum, tip-top kind of condition he could get himself into on that night back in October, he may very well have done the same thing to Francis Ngannou, and we wouldn't be talking about this fight tonight.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, Tyson Fury was there. He seemed pretty happy for Joshua to win the fight. But looking at it from his perspective, what do you think is going to be going through his mind seeing what Joshua did tonight? Will he be bothered? I mean, he's got two fights with Usyk for massive money coming up, and then a potential Joshua fight. I mean, will he be bothered? Do you think that his biggest rival has dealt with Ngannou like that?
I'm sure it's going to be in the back of his mind, and it's going to be a huge part of the promotion when they finally do fight each other. Um, he was. They showed a video replay of Tyson at ringside. He was clapping for Joshua, showing like his sort of appreciation for what Anthony Joshua did, and he knows better than anybody because he's the only other fighter that's ever been in the ring with Francis Ngannou as a professional boxer. So he knows, what was going on there. Um, I think it was a great result for Tyson Fury from the standpoint that he's going to make whatever he's going to make against Usyk. Win or lose, the Joshua fight is still going to be a fight that fans are going to want to see. He can make a shitload of money for that fight. And even though Francis Ngannou got drilled by Anthony Joshua, there'll still be people that want to see him rematch against Ngannou because they felt like he got a raw deal in the fight with Fury. So he's got the potential for 4 huge money fights still in his future, 2 with Usyk, 1 with Joshua, and 1, of course, with Ngannou if Francis decides to continue boxing. As opposed to go back to MMA on a more full-time basis. He said to me in an interview prior to the fight that his intention was 100% to do both sports. So we'll see. It's going to depend, I guess, on what order of the fights there are. But he's got some big business to attend to, in the PFL, in addition to whatever else he may want to do in the boxing ring. But Fury knows, I think, at this point, like that Joshua, that version of Joshua, the kind of condition he was in, the hard punches that he displayed against the opponent that he struggled so badly with, that kind of Joshua can beat Tyson Fury 100%. And he knows that. I think that Fury is going to have to be, in the best possible shape and mentally and physically to make sure that he gives himself the best chance to win that fight the way it feels like he is preparing as far as the fight coming up with Alexander Usyk.
And then you also factor in the Ben Davison effect. Ben Davison, obviously former trainer of Tyson Fury. Should he agree to go ahead with the fight and be in Joshua's corner? I know he's very close to Fury. How much of that is a factor, do you think, going into a potential Joshua Fury fight now?
Well, he's not the trainer for Tyson Fury anymore. He got fired by Tyson Fury. They may still have a relationship, but this is business. I mean, they can be friends and they can respect each other and all that. But he is going to, I assume, if Anthony stays with him, which he seems very happy with him, and there's no reason why he shouldn't be after the way he's performed in the last couple of fights under Ben's tutelage. That they'll be in the, he'll be working the corner with Joshua for the time, for the foreseeable future. And if it happens to be one of those fights as against his former fighter, not the first time that's ever happened. There's plenty of trainers that have been in the corner with one guy and then been in the corner with somebody else that may end up facing that fighter, in the future. So I don't think that's any problem. Ben is obviously a very top level trainer. He's shown it with what he's able to do with Anthony. He showed it what he's able to do with Tyson Fury and others. And I think that when Anthony switched over from his time with Derek James for those 2 fights they did together to go with Ben Davison, my understanding, and Anthony said it time and again, it wasn't because he was unhappy with Derek James. It was just a matter of because of what goes on in Anthony Joshua's life. He lives in London and he had done the training camps in America and just felt like I need to be back home, and he's got other responsibilities and family things to do and whatever. And so I don't think it was a slight on Derek. Ben is in the UK. Ben, can train him in London, and it was a good match. He'd been training with him informally when he wasn't over in Dallas training with Derek, and they hit it off. And he imparted his wisdom, and it made for a good match. And he decided to make the change. But he says he still talks to Derek. Derek's I don't think the kind of guy that's going to hold a grudge. He gets the business. I mean, it's not the first fighter he's ever trained. So, I think that Anthony would have still been successful had he stayed with Derek also.
Mm. And then what was your thoughts on Zhilei Zhang's defeat to Joseph Parker tonight? Obviously 2 knockdowns for Zhang, but didn't really seem to do a lot outside of that.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, he didn't do much else besides the 2 knockdowns. They're what catches the eye. Knockdowns are obviously a pivotal part of any boxing match, but you can score a bunch of knockdowns, but if you don't win any of the rounds beyond that, that's a problem. I was thinking when I looked at this, heard the scoring of the fight and thought about the 2 knockdowns, it reminded me, it's not quite the same thing, but years ago, covering a fight when Vladimir Klitschko fought Samuel Peter. This was a world title elimination fight in Atlantic City. And Samuel Peter scored 3 knockdowns against Vladimir Klitschko. But Vladimir Klitschko won every single other round that there wasn't a knockdown and ended up winning the fight. So you're like, oh my God, the guy got knocked down 3 times, but the other guy walked away with the win. Well, yeah, because it ain't about your thoughts and your emotions, or that knockdowns somehow count more than winning rounds, over the course of a 12-round fight. It's math. It's not aesthetics. And the math adds up that if you score 2 knockdowns, okay, that's the equivalent of 2 10-8 rounds, which I guess if you spread it out over 10-9 rounds is 4 rounds. You still got to win 3 more in the fight to get the points. And Joe Parker did a better job doing that. I didn't think Joe Parker fought a great fight, similar to like with the Deontay Wilder fight. He did what he had to do to get the win. He won enough rounds. It's math. He won 7 rounds, and in his case, he won more than that because he survived the knockdowns and was able to make up those points. And it was a great victory for Joe. I mean, if you really get down to it, again, while there weren't the greatest performances, in my opinion, clearly he and Andy Lee, his trainer, had a game plan. They stuck to it. And now you look at what's happened with Joseph Parker over just the last, 4 months or so since December. He's got 2 of the biggest wins in the heavyweight division back to back in a very short period of time, because for you to beat Deontay Wilder hands down and then survive 2 knockdowns against one of the hardest punchers in the division and win a decision against Zhang, and those are 2 wins in the past couple of fights, the past 2 fights over 4 months. That, who else is doing that? You know what I mean? So going into this fight, it was a matter of my opinion. I don't think this would be like a kind of a crazy thought that if you were looking at the top heavyweights in the division in whatever order, Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, Joe Joyce, or not Joe Joyce, Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, Joe Parker, Zhang Zhilei, and Alexander Usyk. He beat one of them straight up. He also beat Deontay Wilder, who at that time was considered one of those guys. And he's just putting these big wins together. And he's got the WBO interim title now, puts himself in a great position to fight whoever emerges from the fights between Usyk, Fury, presumably Joshua in there. I don't think that Joe and Tyson Fury will ever necessarily fight in the ring. They seem to have too close of a relationship, but if enough money is there, and I know that these guys are professional fighters. They'll fight anybody. I wouldn't totally rule it out. But the main point is this: Joshua is a formidable opponent for Tyson Fury. Joseph Parker will be a formidable opponent for whoever else, is standing there for him to fight after those guys get done with their business.
And then
and by the way, and he did say after the fight that he's going to have to do a rematch with Zhang because they had a rematch clause in the contract. So that's unfortunate, because that's not really the kind of fight that demands a rematch. It wasn't like that exciting where you're like, oh, I got to see it again. I'm not a huge fan of these rematch clauses. I get it in certain instances, but this, why in the heck do we need a rematch between Zhang and Joe right away? You know what I mean? It kind of defeats the purpose of these fights. It's like, you got to get 2 instead of 1. It wasn't always like that. And that kind of is disappointing. But, Joe is a guy that I'm sure he'll honor that contract, and they'll go and they'll do it again. I mean, I'm not sure how excited I'll be for it. And by the way, if it turned out to be a different result and Zhang landed a couple more straight left hands and knocked Joseph Parker out, I don't think that would become a total shock to anybody.
And one other fight on the card I wanted to ask you about is Nick Ball unfortunate to not be WBC featherweight champion tonight?
I think he probably is a little unfortunate. It was a good close fight, fought kind of a weird manner, because it was sort of like the first half of the fight belonged mostly to Ray Vargas. The second half of that fight belonged mostly to Nick Ball. If Nick had maybe been able to start a little quicker, because he just let Vargas just put so many of those first half rounds in the bank. I mean, very well, maybe he might have been up as much as 5 or 6 to nothing, frankly, after the first half of the fight, in the best possible scenario. But Nick's had nothing to be ashamed of. He got a draw. He didn't lose the fight. He didn't get the title, but he doesn't have a loss. I thought he did a good job. If he just said you just need to pick up the pace a little bit, and I'm sure that'll be a talking point in the training camp for whatever his next fight's going to be. But he looked really good against Dog Bay in the Eliminator, and he looked very good in the second half of the fight tonight. He just was not able to get the motor going those first several rounds, and he got behind, it seems to me, on the scorecards, and he was not able to make it up enough. I still thought he did enough to get the win, particularly getting the knockdowns the way he did. One was kind of a questionable knockdown. The other one was definitely a clean knockdown. But Nick Ball is still a younger fighter, still in his 20s. He still has a bright future, in my opinion. This is not like the end of the line. There's nothing to be ashamed of. He fought a good fight. He put a top level world champion on his rear end 2 times, and he comes away with a draw in his first chance at a world title. And I think that he still has a great chance down the road to win a championship.
And just lastly, Dan, I know there's a lot of breaking news in boxing this week.
Oh, busy.
Very busy. Thoughts on Jake Paul, Mike Tyson?
Where do you even start on that? I mean, it did come out of the blue a little bit. I mean, that was there's not that many things that get announced in the sport that shock me. A lot of times I kind of know about them before they are announced and all that, but I didn't know. I didn't see this one coming. As they say, it wasn't on my bingo card to see Jake Paul against Mike Tyson. To me, the only question is, are they going to make this a full-fledged official boxing match that will count on the records and be fought under completely normal standard boxing rules? Will it be an exhibition? They did not make that clear when they made the announcement. I have inquired with their team about it. They don't want to answer the question. I guess they're working on it. We'll see what happens. But I know for a fact, because I spoke to the regulators in Texas where the fight's supposed to take place, and you'd figure they would know what the status was, but they haven't been told what the fight is. The only thing that they know officially is that the folks from MVP, and the promotional entities that are working on this event, that they put in a request with the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation to get the date to host a fight at the AT&T Stadium on July 20th. But the only reason why the regulator that I spoke to knew that it was, I guess, for Jake Paul against Mike Tyson is because he saw it in the media. But they've never made a formal request for that fight. They have to notify. I didn't even know this particular rule, but I was explained to me that the promoter does not have to give the regulators the main event or the list of fights on the show until at the latest 3 weeks before the fight, 21 days before the fight. So they've got plenty of time to get that part squared away. And obviously I asked about the licensing situation, and obviously it won't be an issue to get a license for Jake Paul, who just fought in Texas last year. No issues. He's a young man. Tyson getting a boxing license at this age and that kind of match against a man 30 years younger, I'm a little skeptical of that. So what it tells me, Jonathan, is that they probably were trying to make this, or are trying to make this, an official fight. Because if they weren't, they probably would have just announced right off the bat that they're doing an exhibition match. And they didn't do that. But, boxing people and promoters, they like to play games. When Tyson and Roy Jones had their exhibition back in November of 2020, which, by the way, a fight card that Jake Paul was in his second professional fight on. And here we are 4 years later, he's supposed to be fighting Tyson. But back then, they made it clear that this was an exhibition match. California wasn't going to mess around with that. They were spoken to. We're not going to try to go knock each other out. We're not looking to hurt anybody. We're looking to just move around, give the fans a good show your skills, and let's make a big event. And they did that. But there were other times, just not that long ago, Tyson Fury against Francis Ngannou. When they announced the fight, they gave all this crazy, stupid language in their press announcement. They never made clear exhibition or not. And we didn't really know what to make of it. They still never actually made it official. We didn't know for 100% until it showed up on their formal records that it was a win for Fury and a loss, for Ngannou. And so they've made it very ambiguous in their announcement on Paul against Tyson. In terms of the match itself, it's going to get the masses excited because they're two iconic kind of names. Jake has a huge following among younger people with his exploits in boxing on YouTube, social media, and everything like that. And Mike Tyson's one of the most recognizable, forget about boxers or even athletes, just people, in the world. Mike Tyson, you could plop him down pretty much anywhere on the planet and he's going to get recognized. He's definitely, him and Muhammad Ali are the two most famous boxers who ever lived. It's not even close. But at 57 years old, and he'll be 58 before this event takes place, does anybody really need to see a guy like that getting beat up? If they make it an exhibition, it'll still be a big event. I do love the fact that Netflix is involved, to have another platform that is looking to put up some money to be involved in a boxing match. Remember, this is not a pay-per-view. So they're not doing this for charity. That means Netflix is writing a big check for this event. I don't know how much it is, but I promise you that it's a lot of money. You know what I mean? To be able to satisfy the financial desires of a Mike Tyson and a Jake Paul on this level of event, that they're writing a huge check for that. And it's in a big stadium. They didn't pick just even a Madison Square Garden or a O2 Arena, or a normal type of arena where they do sports events and concerts and such. They picked one of the biggest stadiums that we have in the United States. It might even be the biggest in terms of actual seating capacity. It's over 80,000. They can expand it to over 100,000 indoors. And I've covered many boxing events there. They've had 7 previous events. And my question, I did actually a Twitter poll about this a couple of days ago when the fight was announced. My question was simply, can it break the all-time indoor American boxing attendance record, which was set in that building when Canelo Alvarez defeated Billy Joe Saunders in their super middleweight unification? They did about 76,000 and change for that fight. It broke the record from 1978 when Muhammad Ali had the rematch against Leon Spinks and regained the heavyweight title. That was in the Superdome in New Orleans. And because of the name value of a Jake Paul and a Mike Tyson, and that large of a stadium, you wonder, can it break the record? We'll see. But it's going to be a big freaking event.
Yeah, I completely blew up the internet, and but there is a lot of big fights coming up, so I'm sure I will get you back on, Dan. I will end it here because it's probably going to be light outside in a few minutes. So
Well, think about it like this. It's late for you in England. It's getting on about quarter to 10 here at the evening where I live in the East Coast of the United States. They were in the arena in Riyadh for this show. It was almost 4 o'clock in the morning.
yeah, and the press conference just ended, I believe, at 5 a.m. local
That is
time.
ridiculous.
So yeah, the new age here in 2024. But Dan, appreciate it. Like I say, everyone check out the Substack, link in description. Just tell everyone about it, and also your podcast, which I believe will be out Sunday.
Yeah, we do. I do the podcast. My partner TJ Reeves and I, we do it twice a week. We do it on Thursdays. It comes out Thursday night, early Friday, where we usually preview the weekend and all the news, and we go over like anniversaries and that sort of thing. We have interviews oftentimes, and then we do the recap and do the same sort of stuff on Sunday. So we've been doing that consistently for like it's going on over a year and a half now, and it seems to have been catching on. We appreciate the listeners. We have a lot of fun doing it. We've got some great interviews coming up with Keith Thurman and Tim Zhu and Oscar Valdez. We have on the current episode the young, outstanding junior middleweight prospect that's going to headline in New York City on the St. Patrick's Day weekend, Callum Walsh. I had Francis Ngannou on the previous episode previewing to talk to him about the fight that just happened between him and Joshua. So that takes up a lot of time, but we have a great time to do it in the Substack. Obviously, that's my baby where I do all my writing at danrafael.substack.com. And I would encourage everybody to just go there. All you got to do is put your email in. And as I like to say, the news comes to you. You don't have to go searching it out.
Absolutely. Check that out. Links will be in the description. Dan, appreciate your time, and I'll catch up soon.
I appreciate it, Jonathan. Great to talk to you, my man.